Yeah, totally agree. You mentioned the physicality of the league during that time and kind of a turning point in terms of the Knicks, weren't able to win the title, and that style of play kind of, I would say, somewhat faded away, but I would say returned a little bit with the Detroit Pistons in their own way during those 2000s teens. But now we're in the era of the 3 point shot, and that's being blamed for low ratings. And you cover this league fairly closely, and I just want to get your perspective on kind of where the league is at currently in 2024, where you see it going beyond. You have so many memories, you have so much experience, and in my opinion, it seems the lack of interest in the league and the low ratings is being blamed on the 3 point shot. But correct me if I'm wrong, I see 3 point percentages be pretty high. So it's not like people are players are shooting the 3 point shot terribly, and scoring's up. So I just wonder, is that a scapegoat to what's other lying problems with the league going on? It's a natural evolution. It could be multiple things that could be in terms of this season, or do you think there's a serious problem and the NBA needs to take action in terms of the rule set and the players? Is there something more insidious going on, you think?
I think it's somewhat complicated. I think I'm always a little bit weirded out. I had a junior high basketball coach who I played for who, I think my sister bumped into him at a store or something, and so had like a full-blown conversation with her. I got in touch with him, because I hadn't spoken to him in years, and we connected over the phone. This is someone that coached at my junior high for 32 years or something like that. And when I spoke to him, I asked him to what extent was he enjoying the league, enjoying basketball. He's like, I don't really watch anymore. And he started to complain about how it's all me. And I don't want to overstep too much, but I feel like there's a lot of coded language that's used about the league, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. I feel like there's as much talent in the league as there's ever been.
Agreed.
Some players are more showboaty in nature, but there's also a lot of skill. There's also a lot more attention to detail than there ever was from the standpoint of defenses and data and implementing those things and game plans and stuff like that. Teams that don't play together on a string don't win titles in this league, period. When you watch Steph, yeah, he could shoot his tail off, but he's also getting screens and rescreens and passing the ball to Draymond and kind of playing hot potato with them and watching people chase Steph across the court. I don't know if you saw the game the other night when they were playing the Clippers, and the only reason the Warriors didn't have a chance to send the game to overtime or win is because three players dead sprinted at Steph and left basically the other four Warriors wide open so that Steph wouldn't beat them. That's skill at a level that we haven't seen. Steph is obviously skill at a level we haven't seen from a shooting perspective. Yeah. That's not somehow not entertaining to me. Like, granted, I didn't come up during the 80s. I wasn't in position to watch. And granted, in researching this book and reporting this book out, I had to watch a lot more of the 80s and the 90s, and it was fun to watch. It also was kind of ugly to watch. It looked more like football than basketball, comparing it to today's game. But I also would say that that's part of the stuff, too, is that the NBA has tried to market the product more aggressively. It's a much more international game. So the stardom and the star power is not as homegrown as it was, which maybe prompts people to tune out. I think that's part of the reason the league has not been able to successfully market someone like Nikola Jokic, despite him winning 3 out of the last 4 titles, or 3 out of the last 4 MVPs. I also think that the NBA is going far more head-to-head than it ever has with the NFL. Even today, the NBA was talking about, or there was a report that the NBA is at least considering the idea of maybe moving the NBA Cup and the in-season tournament that has been pretty successful so far to closer to the end of the season so that it can have its own runway and not have to compete with football, which the whole point of it was to try to make early season games more entertaining, and now they're talking about pushing that, but they're also having to compete with the NFL for Christmas this year, which is different because that has traditionally been an NBA holiday. So I think that there's a lot of that where it's kind of like, well, if the NBA is a 12-month-a-year thing now, the NBA has to compete with other sports that it traditionally has not had to. So I think that's part of it. I obviously think that there's a lot happening in this country that, let's face it, the NBA is a primarily black sport as far as the people that are out there playing. The they've been pretty progressive. The players, let me be very clear, I think the players have been particularly progressive about certain things. I don't think necessarily the owners are in most cases or in all cases. Some are. But there are people that during the bubble a couple of years ago made it very clear that they were not going to watch because players wanted to kneel and players wanted to be arm in arm. And, I want people to stand for the national anthem. Okay, like whatever. People are, as we saw on November 5th, people are going to feel differently about a whole lot of things. And we are very polarized in this country. I think we would be kidding ourselves if we were to say that that doesn't have a role in why people do or don't watch the NBA. I know in particular I was interviewing someone for the last Knicks book, and it was someone that was attached and kind of connected in some ways to Pat Riley, and he more or less said, LeBron is the biggest racist I've ever heard of. And I was like, I was just kind of miffed, and I was just like, I have to go. I was already kind of done asking my questions of the person, but it's like I don't know how anybody walks away from anything thinking that LeBron is this massive racist. But if that's how some people feel, I think you have very little chance of reaching them, quite frankly, in terms of wanting them to be a fan of the sport. He's the face of the sport. You might not like everything he's done, but when you consider the pressures that he's been under since his teenage years, where he was on pay-per-view and people were paying to watch this man play basketball before he was even close to being a professional. Again, I'm not going to say he's done every single thing right, but he really hasn't done that much wrong, certainly in a societal sort of way, in my opinion. So from that standpoint, I'm not saying that the league has to be happy with what it has, because you always can do a little bit more outreach, but I feel like for me, I'm hearing people come up with reasons to not watch the sport or the reasons they don't like the sport. They can have whatever reason they want. It's not for me to judge, but some of it doesn't really sound like it's the quality of the game or the sport to me. There's more skill than there's ever been. There's more speed than there's ever been. There's more athleticism than there's ever been. These guys are actually resting their bodies a little bit more than normal. Some people don't like that. So if you want to not watch because you would rather have a more tired version of some guys, but because they're playing every single night instead of taking maybe a game off every couple of weeks, okay, so be it. But those are their reasons. I can't really go inside their heads, but I feel like some of the stuff I've heard doesn't quite add up for me. But it's a competitive time in sports as far as attention for eyeballs versus Netflix. How many people even have cable to watch this stuff anymore versus streaming? What is it costing them to do it? Any number of things.
I think you bring up a great point, just with kind of the racial aspect. The hypocrisy is full on display. What we see with the UFC, that is a full MAGA commercial. And I'm a hardcore mixed martial arts fan. And if you watch that pay-per-view that took place this past weekend, there's nothing. It's nothing but a political ad for, our incoming president. And just to be outraged by the NBA and not that, I think it's very clear in terms of what those people think.
I don't know that I care so much that I'll call it outrage, but it makes me upset that I tend to think that there would be a big overlap if we had like a Venn diagram of the people that were furious with Kaepernick. And as you mentioned, our incoming president, he said to fire the sons of bitches, to get them off the field, to cut them. Colin Kaepernick was peacefully protesting, in my opinion, but also just, I don't know how you can say he wasn't hurting anybody. He wasn't even speaking. He was just kneeling, which if you go back and look, it took games before people even realized he was doing that. A reporter noticed it and asked, and then it was talked about. Not to mention that Colin Kaepernick spoke with someone who was a veteran to make sense of how he should best protest, and that was the advice he got, was to do that. But neither here nor there. One of the things that upsets me most is that you have a group of people, and I think it's a significant group of people, that on the one hand says that was disrespectful. On the one hand also says they don't want people burning down cities when George Floyd happens, which, by the way, George Floyd was killed when he had his neck kneeled on so that he couldn't breathe. So it was kind of the ultimate hypocrisy, and from that standpoint, this is exactly the thing that Colin Kaepernick was talking about. But honestly, and I know I'm long-winded with everything I say, what I've been upset about for years is the fact that there's so many people that view the national anthem as sacred to where they want to call out Colin Kaepernick for not standing during it. But then when I go to games every other night at Madison Square Garden, there are people screaming and shouting, "Let's go Knicks!" whenever someone is singing the national anthem, like you can't wait 35 seconds to get that praise off. Like you have to interrupt the singer who is singing about war and how our country was still standing there after a really hideous, insidious war. Like, to me, you don't get to complain about Kaepernick, but then desecrate a song that is talking about that stuff. To me, and I'm someone that I would be fine if we didn't sing the anthem before games and we didn't politicize it. It doesn't need to be, in my opinion. But if we're going to, and you're going to take issue with someone behaving peacefully and not saying a word, don't you dare scream and shout as if the game has already started when this is actually something meant to pay respect. And I know that I'm on my soapbox right now, but so are these people that are saying, "How dare you kneel?" And it's just like people don't see the disconnect, and it really is frustrating for me. Again, I don't think I'm infuriated by it, but it's just the hypocrisy and how little sense it makes within the scope of the direction our country has taken is really weird to me. As the way I would put it.
I concur. I agree. And I see that hypocrisy again. It's ironic. It took place in Madison Square Garden, the last UFC event.
I know.
It's on full display. It's a shame because it's a sport that, I still watch and I truly love, but it's crazy how it's turned in this really, I think, horrible direction in so many ways. It's ruined my enjoyment of it, and I love it. Combat sports, specifically MMA. It's a bummer, and that hypocrisy it's a full display. It sucks. It's a bummer.